Last winter, The King's Speech dominated the Oscars when it took home 4 out of the 12 Academy Awards it was nominated for, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Original Screenplay. The movie is based on the true story of George VI, the father of the present Queen of England. George VI was a man who in the 1930s desperately did not want to be king. He was afflicted nearly all of his life by a crippling stutter, which stood to rob Britain of a commanding voice at the very moment that Hitler rose to threaten Europe. The story struck a nerve with audiences and critics alike, as we reported last February, just before Colin Firth won his first Oscar for his critically acclaimed portrayal of George VI.
The story will continue in a moment.
Did you like being king?
I think it's hard to think of anything worse, really. I mean, I wouldn't change places with this man, and I would be very surprised if anybody watching the film would change places with this man. It's a perfect storm of catastrophic misfortunes for a man who does not want the limelight, who does not want to be heard publicly, who does not want to expose this humiliating impediment that he spent his life battling.
I have received
He's actually fighting his own private war. He'd rather have been facing machine gun fire than have to face the microphone.
The microphone hung like a noose for the king who was a stutterer from the age of 8. He was never meant to be king, but in 1936 his older brother gave up the throne to marry Wallis Simpson, a divorced American. Suddenly, George VI and his wife Elizabeth reigned over an empire that was home to 25% of the world population. And like the George of over 1,000 years before, he had a dragon to slay: radio.
When I looked at images of him or I listened to him, you do see that physical struggle.
At a time when this country...
His eyes close and you see him try to gather himself. And it's heartbreaking.
The fact had to be...
Among those listening was a 7-year-old British boy who, like the king, had a wealth of words but could not get them out.
I was a profound stutterer. I started stuttering just before my 3rd birthday. I didn't rid myself of it until I was 16. But my parents would encourage me to listen to the king's speeches during the war. And I thought, wow, if he can do that, there is hope for me. So he became my childhood hero.
David Seidler wrote the movie. He'd grown up with the story, but he didn't want to tell the tale until he had permission from the late king's widow, known as the Queen Mother.
You sent a letter to the Queen Mother.
I wrote to the Queen Mother, and finally an answer came, and it said, "Dear Mr. Seidler, please, not during my lifetime. The memory of these events is still too painful. If the Queen Mum says wait to an Englishman waits." But I didn't think I'd have to wait that long.
Why?
She was a very elderly lady. 25 years later, just shy of her 102nd birthday, she finally left this realm.
After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, Seidler went to work. He found the theme of the story in the clash between His Royal Highness and an Australian commoner who became the king's salvation, an unknown speech therapist named Lionel Logue.
The words that keep coming up when you hear about Lionel Logue are charisma and confidence. He would never say, "I can fix your stuttering." He would say, "You can get a handle on your stuttering. I know you can succeed."
Do come in.
Geoffrey Rush plays Lionel Logue, an unorthodox therapist and a royal pain.
What'll I call you?
Prince Albert, Frederick, Arthur, George.
How about Bertie?
They say you can't make this stuff up, and in much of this film, that's true. David Seidler could not have imagined, but his work would lead to a discovery that would rewrite history. It happened when the researchers for the film tracked down Lionel Logue's grandson, Mark Logue, because the movie needed family photos to get the clothing right.
And you told them what?
I told them, yeah, I've got pictures. I've got some diaries too.
His grandfather's diaries were up in the attic in boxes that the family had nearly forgotten. When Mark Logue hauled them down for the movie, he discovered more than 100 letters between the therapist and his king.
My dear Logue, thank you so much for sending me the books for my birthday, which are most acceptable. So British, isn't it? Yours very sincerely, Albert.
As you read through all of these letters between your grandfather and the king, what did it tell you about the relationship between these two men?
It's not the relationship between the doctor and his patient, it's the relationship between friends.
We met Mark Logue at the same address where his grandfather treated the king, and among the hundreds of pages of documents were Logue's first observations of George VI.
Probably the most startling thing was the king's appointment card. It described in detail the king's stammer, which we hadn't seen anywhere else. And it also described in detail the intensity with the appointments.
Shall I see you next week?
I shall see you every day.
The king came here every day?
Every day, yeah, every single day for an hour.
Through the weekends?
Through weekends. You know, he was so committed. I think he decided, this is it. I have to overcome this stammer, and this is my chance.
In the film, the king throws himself into what looked like crazy therapies. But in truth, Lionel Logue didn't write much about his methods.
Slowly exhale, and down comes Her Royal Highness.
All right, Bertie. It's actually quite good fun.
These scenes are based on writer David Seidler's experience and ideas of the actors.
Feel the looseness of the jaw. We threw in stuff that we knew. I mean, somebody had told me that the only way to release that muscle... And of course, little did I realize that the particular lens they were using on that shot made me look like a Galapagos tortoise.
Even as they were shooting the film, the actors read the newly discovered diaries and letters and worked them into the script.
The line at the end, I found, reading the diaries in bed one night, because this is what I used to do every night, when Logue says, you still stammered on the W.
You still stammered on the W.
I had to throw in a few, so they knew it was me. It showed that these men had a sense of humor, it showed there was wit, it showed there was self-mockery, and it just showed a kind of buoyancy and spirit between them. The fact that he spoke on a desk standing upright in this little hidden room is something we found in the diaries as well.
You've redecorated, Logue.
In reality, he had to stand up to speak. He had to have the window open.
Some fresh air.
And he had to have his jacket off.
There you are, darling.
And that's a wonderful, specific, little eccentric observation that came from reality.
One of the most remarkable things to come out of the Logue attic was a copy of what may be the most important speech the king ever made.
40 seconds.
The speech that gives the movie its name. This was the moment when King George VI had to tell his people that for the second time in a generation they were at war with Germany. The stakes were enormous. The leader of the empire could not stumble over these words.
You have the original copy of the speech that the king made to the people on the advent of World War II.
Yeah, I have it right here.
On Buckingham Palace stationery. What are all of these marks? All these vertical lines, what do they mean?
They're deliberate pauses so that the king would be able to sort of attack the next word without hesitation. He's replacing some words, he's crossing them out and suggesting another word that the king would find easier to pronounce.
Here's a line that he's changed. We've tried to find a peaceful way out of the differences between my government. He's changed that from my government to the differences between ourselves and those who would be our enemies.
We have tried to find a peaceful way out
Of the differences
of the differences
between ourselves
between ourselves
and those
and those
who are now
our
enemies.
enemies.
Well done, my friend.
Thank you. Your Majesty.
You know, I'm curious, have either of you snuck into a theater and watched this film with a regular audience?
Now, the only time I've ever snuck in to watch my own film, I got quite nervous about it because I just thought it'd be embarrassing to be seen doing that. So I pulled my collar up and the hat down over my eyes and, snuck in as if I was going into a porn cinema or something, and went up the stairs, crept in, sidled in to sit at the back, and I was the only person in the in the cinema. That's how well the film was doing.
Now, it's a lot harder for Colin Firth to go unnoticed. Recently, he was immortalized in Hollywood pavement and brought along his Italian wife, Livia. They've been married 14 years and have 2 sons. With The King's Speech, we realize that Firth is one of the most familiar actors that we know almost nothing about. So we took him back to his hometown in Hampshire, outside London. He's the son of college professors, but Firth dropped out of high school to go to acting school.
But you don't have a Hampshire accent.
No. My accent has changed over the years as a matter of survival. So until I was about 10, I used to talk like that. I remember it might have been on this street, actually, where I think the conversation went something like, "Oi, you want to fight?" And I said, "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Well, because you'll win." "No, I won't." "Well, will I win then?" "Well, you might not." And so, we were trying to process the logic, and I thought, have we dealt with it now? I mean,
do we still
we
have to
actually
fight?
have to do the practical now. We've done the theory.
He wanted us to see his first stage. It turned out to be the yard of his elementary school, where he told stories from his own imagination.
And at lunchtimes on the field up here, the crowd would gather and demand the story. They'd all sit round and say, "No, we want the next bit."
Did you have the thought at that early age, this is what I want to do?
No, not until I was 14.
And what happened then?
I used to go to drama classes up the road here on Saturday mornings. And one day, I just had this epiphany. I can do this. I want to do this.
He's done 42 films in 26 years, most of them the polar opposite of The King's Speech, like Mamma Mia. How hard was it to get you to do the scene that's used for the closing credits?
Do you know what? That may be the reason I did the movie.
You have no shame.
I'm sorry. That's if one thing has come out of 60 Minutes here is we have discovered, we've unveiled the fact that Colin Firth has no shame. I am such a drag queen. It's one of my primary driving forces in life. If you cannot dangle a spandex suit and a little bit of mascara in front of me and not just have me go weak at the knees.
From Queen to King, Colin Firth is an actor with wide range who had his best shot at his first Oscar. Like George VI himself, this movie wasn't meant to be king. The King's Speech was made for under $15 million. But the movie, the director, the screenwriter, David Seidler, who made it happen, and all the principal actors were nominated for Academy Awards. Geoffrey Rush had won once before.
What advice do you have for this man who may very likely win the Oscar this year?
Well, enjoy it. It's not the end of anything because you'll go on and you'll do a couple more flops, probably. You might even sneak into another film where no one's in the house.
But on Oscar night, stammering King George had the last word. A lot of movies are based on true stories, but The King's Speech has reclaimed history.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com for a closer look at the stash of letters discovered in a London attic from King George VI to Lionel Logue, sponsored by Pfizer.